What's up, savvy expats? In today's video, we're getting a peek at how the top 1% of the Philippines live and what would even classify you as part of the top 1% in this country. Alright, without wasting time, let's get into it. So before we even talk about how the top 1% of the Philippines live, we have to find out how much money it takes to be a part of this prestige class. Well, according to the intelligence lab at Knight Frank in the Philippines, you need $60,000 in the bank to be considered among the top 1% in Philippine society. Doesn't sound so prestige now, does it? Usually, when we think of the top 1%, we think of ultra high net worth individuals. Those that are flying high in private jets, riding in Rolls, and those that consider themselves to be a
genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
aka people like Tony Stark. But on the contrary, statistically speaking, the top 1% of the Philippines isn't tremendously wealthy. To put it into perspective, $60,000 is the median annual income in the US according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So basically, you take your average Joe in America that probably works an office job, give him a one-way ticket to the Philippines, and then all of a sudden, he becomes Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, well, not exactly, but technically, you can go from being in middle class in America to being in the top echelons of Philippine society. So really, what's considered to be elite here is not really rich. Now, if you're at the top 1% of the 1% here, then that's a different story. As for monthly salaries, the monthly household income to reach the top 1% of the Philippines is $3,000 per month. Now, to be a part of the top 10% of the Philippines, you need a monthly income of $1,300 per month. So if you're curious what will afford you a good lifestyle in the Philippines or what's a good budget, then keep this in mind. If you come here with a budget of over $3,000 per month, you're living like the top 1% of the Philippines. That includes you living better than doctors, lawyers, pilots, and engineers.
I'm a doctor.
If you come here with a budget of $1,300 per month, then you're living like the top 10% of the Philippines. That includes you living better than IT developers, architects, sales representatives, and real estate agents. Then again, keep in mind that this all depends on your personal preference and your standards. A comment that I received on my last video that really sank in was, "It's a bittersweet feeling knowing that my order from Starbucks is the average day's wages for a laborer in the PH. But yeah, the dollar stretches pretty far here." I've never really thought about it this way. It really puts into perspective not only how low most paying jobs are in the Philippines, but the wage gap between the average American and the average Filipino. But now that you know what's classified as the top 1% of the Philippines, $60,000 or $3,000 per month, let's dive into how the top 1% of the Philippines live. First off, and most commonly, the top 1% of the Philippines almost always have personal drivers. As I mentioned in a past video, you can hire drivers in the Philippines for as low as $250 per month. They provide the car and everything, you just have to pay for their gas and meals. Secondly, the way the top 1% of the Philippines often live is having a place in the city and in the province. To be honest, you don't have to be crazy wealthy at all for this either. Really, for the top 1%, this is about having the convenience factor and being able to live that hybrid lifestyle we talked about in past videos. So say you have a place in the city, be it Cebu City, Mandaluyong, Makati, BGC, you name it, for $1,000 per month. And then you have a place in the province for $500 per month, then right there, that's $1,500 per month in rentals. As I mentioned, $3,000 per month budget would put you in the top 1% of the Philippines. And let me just say really quick, $3,000 per month is the income here that would put you at the top 1% of the Philippines. You're coming here with $3,000 per month budget, then you're higher than that. Anyways, if you opted for this sort of lifestyle and come here with that kind of budget, then that would leave you with $1,500 left for other necessities. So if you're part of the top 1% in the Philippines, then this is doable, which is why many in this category live this sort of lifestyle. And by all means, say you're not in this category, but you want something similar. Well, I suggest that you live just outside of one of the major cities of the Philippines. This way, you're paying the Philippine provincial prices while still having access to the modern conveniences of the city. There's plenty of expats that take this route not only because it's more affordable, but also because it's ideal. To be able to live that simple, minimalist life that many expats are looking for, it's very affordable and you're still living the Philippine lifestyle, that's good living for many of you guys. Just like any expat, you still want to be close to the best hospitals. You want to be near the airports. You want access to modern conveniences and services. And you'd want to be near Western restaurant options and near Western infrastructure, all the while not having to pay the Western prices. If that's the case for you, I highly suggest living just outside of the major cities of your preferred choice. While it may be tempting for some of you coming from a Western country to be completely removed from anything Westernized, I wouldn't suggest it. God forbid you have to go to the hospital or need any type of help, you want to be near the advanced parts of the Philippines. Now, for the third way that the top 1% of the Philippines live, that is that they almost always have house help. Needless to say, you don't need to be a part of the top 1% of the Philippines to have this sort of luxury. Hiring house help in the Philippines is so inexpensive that it'll hardly take a sizable chunk out of your budget. The average maid's salary in the Philippines is $200 to $300 per month. And so it's no wonder why the top 1% of the Philippines hire maids and nannies. And of course, the value they provide is tremendous. Not only can they clean and tidy up the place, but they'll also go out and get groceries. Many of them can cook. They can tag along on your trips to help with navigating and translating. And it's the whole package deal. All you need to provide them is their salary, a room to sleep in, and sometimes college tuition. Other than that, if you don't want to have to prepare your own meals, the average cook's salary in the Philippines is $300 per month. Ooh, voice crack.
I'm on the commentator's desk.
And if you have kids and you'll be out and about, the average nanny's or yaya's salary in the Philippines is around $200 per month. So these are just a few of the luxuries that not only the top 1% of the Philippines have, but really anybody above a certain class. And the next luxury that's afforded by the top 1% of the Philippines and many expats that come here is taking trips often. With a larger budget, you can afford to stay the weekend at a luxury resort on the beach or a trip to the popular spots of the Philippines. For example, Tagaytay is a popular spot for the top 1% of Manila to get away for the weekend. Again, you don't have to be a part of the top 1% of Manila because plenty of people, no matter what class from Manila, go to Tagaytay, but because it's more expensive than most other provinces in the Philippines, this is where the top 1% go. And so oftentimes they have their own house in this province because it's much cooler here and also the higher elevations. This is probably the most popular getaway spot just outside of Manila. Another popular getaway in Luzon is La Union. Anyone that's visiting La Union is coming here for primarily one reason and one reason only, and that is to surf. Only 5 hours away from Metro Manila, this is the ideal place to get away from the hustle and bustle. Or, for the top 1% of Cebu City, you may find them relaxing at Shangri-La's Mukton Resort and Spa. Spanning over 12 hectares of lush scenery situated on a sandy beach with beautiful landscaping, Shangri-La's Mukton Resort and Spa is one of the most exclusive and highest end places to stay in the Cebu area. This is without a doubt one of the most, if not the most, luxurious beach resorts in Cebu. People come here to experience the private beach, the relaxing environment, world-class facilities, and leisure opportunities. Lastly, the top 1% of the Philippines can often afford trips to the most popular destinations in this country, for example, Boracay. One of the nicest resorts in Boracay, which is yet again another Shangri-La property, is called Shangri-La Boracay's Resort and Spa. It's one of the most expensive hotels in the Philippines, and the resort is on a hilltop overlooking the crystal clear waters of Boracay. Other than that, you have Crimson Resort and Spa Boracay, and plus many other luxury resorts in Boracay. All in all, the top 1% of the Philippines can often take weekend trips to get away. In summary, there's no exact or one way that the top 1% of the Philippines live, but these are just a few of the most common things that they do and that's afforded by them to name. Just as the top 1% can do all of these things that I mentioned, you also have the top 1% that live very minimalistically and simply, and you wouldn't even be able to tell that they're part of this demographic. As a matter of fact, there's a lot lot of Filipinos and expat that do have this kind of money, but they choose not to show it off as to not get targeted, and they don't enjoy that lifestyle. Oh, and I forgot, another thing I must mention that the top 1% of the Philippines do is that they join country clubs. Tennis, golf, and those kind of recreational sports are not often found in the Philippines unless you have a country club membership. That is, if you want a quality course and facility. Other than that, going to spas and getting massages are also done by the top 1% of the Philippines. I didn't get into that because that can really be afforded by anyone in the Philippines as well. So there you have it, Savvy Expats. That is how the top 1% of the Philippines live. I didn't mention buying fancy cars, going to very high-end restaurants because, well, then again, the top 1% of the Philippines is not tremendously rich. And if you enjoy this video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. And so, thank you for watching Savvy Expats, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.